Welcome back to Gospel at a Glance. I'm Andy, and I'm so glad you're here. Today is the first day of Lent for 2026, and I wanted to do something a little bit different. So instead of moving straight through a gospel passage, today we're doing kind of an aside. So I want to, for the 6 Wednesdays of Lent, to take a handful of reflections that have shaped my own faith and letting them have a moment. Lent is a season for attention, for noticing how we meet God where we actually are and not where we think we're supposed to be. Today we begin with a story that never really stops surprising me every time I read it, and that is the Roman centurion from Matthew chapter 8. So we're going to revisit the scripture and then we'll get into the reflections. So this is Matthew 8, 5 through 13, and this is from the ESV. When he had entered Capernaum, a centurion came forward to him, appealing to him, "Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, suffering terribly." And he said to him, "I will come and heal him." But the centurion replied, "Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I too am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. And I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes, and to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he marveled and said to those who followed him, "Truly I tell you, with no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west and recline at table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven, while the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." And to the centurion Jesus said, "Go, let it be done for you as you have believed." And the servant was healed at that very moment. All right. This encounter between Jesus and the centurion is quietly extraordinary. So a centurion, a Roman centurion, is a Gentile, a military officer, and a representative of the ruling power. Rome has occupied this area where the Jews live. And he comes to Jesus, a Jewish man, a rabbi, and asks for mercy. Not for himself, but for his servant. And all of that alone is unexpected. But what really stands out for me is how the centurion understands Jesus. He doesn't ask Jesus to come and examine the servant. He doesn't ask for a sign. He doesn't ask for proof. He says, "Only say the word." And then he explains why. And for a long time, I didn't really understand this. He says, "For I too am a man under authority." The centurion interprets Jesus through the only framework that he knows. Because he is a soldier, he has authority, he gives commands, and order is maintained, right? He says, "I say go and they go. I say come and they come. I say do this and they do it." In his world, when someone with authority speaks, himself or someone else, things happen. Words carry weight. Action follows. He believes that if Jesus speaks, there will be a response. And Jesus marvels. And that matters a lot. Jesus does not often marvel in the Gospels. But here he marvels at the faith of the Roman centurion. He says, "With no one in Israel have I found such faith." And that sentence should absolutely stop us in our tracks. The outsider here sees something clearly that the others who are closer to Jesus may not. And Jesus names it as great faith. I think even more interesting to me is that this story always makes me think about the filters that we bring when we meet Jesus. Every one of us has our own lens, our own way that we look at the world. And it is shaped by our experiences, our jobs, our families, our priorities, our trauma, our experiences growing up, our experiences as adults. All of our lived experience shapes how we see things. That's why every single person is different. In this case, the centurion's faith is shaped by discipline and hierarchy and a chain of command. A farmer might recognize God in the time to plant seeds and the time to harvest and that cycle. A parent might understand God through this idea of fierce and forgiving love with guardrails. A teacher, like myself, might encounter Jesus through the slow, patient work of helping others to grow and seeing potential in others that they don't necessarily see in themselves. Our experiences don't limit faith. They give it a language. They give us metaphors for understanding who God is and how God acts. In my own personal background, I grew up with a single mom. My dad wasn't around. And I learned resilience and determination very early. I learned from her what quiet strength looks like. I also grew up knowing that life is fragile and it's a gift. You know, when I was born, there were complications and I almost didn't get to be here in this world. And that story never filled me with fear. It grounded me and it reminded me that every breath is grace. And when I felt called to teach in my early 20s, it wasn't dramatic. It was just this steady, persistent call, a nagging conscience. And it was very, very, very persistent. And I could imagine spending my life working with people to facilitate what they needed as far as knowledge. I could not see myself continuing on the path I had chosen at that point, which was as a designer and a marketer building brands, when I could be helping build up people. I could help students' confidence and curiosity and opportunity. So teaching became my mission field. My way of saying to God, here I am, send me. So when I read the Gospels, I tend to see Jesus first as a teacher. A person who meets people where they are, one who sees their potential before they do, and one who believes transformation is possible long before any results appear. That's my lens. That's how I see Jesus. Another remarkable thing about the centurion story is what Jesus doesn't do. He doesn't correct the centurion's framework. He doesn't tell him to stop thinking like a soldier. He doesn't require him to come up with some new metaphor for understanding. Jesus honors the lens that this man, this authority, and this soldier brings. And through that lens, Jesus reveals himself. And that is grace. God meets us in our humanity, in our experiences, where we are. And he doesn't ask us to escape those things, but to let them shape our understanding. The centurion's obedience became his window into faith. My classroom became mine. Yours might be your kitchen table or your job, your office, your studio, your front porch, or your time with your kids. The Gospels speak the language of our lives. So when I read this story now, I don't just see a soldier. I see a teacher and a parent. I see anyone trying to make sense of Jesus using the patterns of their life. Faith is not about abandoning your experience and your frame of reference, but it's about letting God redeem it. Lent invites us to ask, what lens am I bringing right now? And how might God be speaking through it? Jesus imagines a kingdom wide enough for many to come from east and west, a kingdom where faith is recognizable in many accents, and the gospel doesn't flatten our stories. It just lifts them up and illuminates them. Thank you for spending this time with me on Gospel at a Glance for this first week of Lent. You can find more like it on Substack, and each week during Lent we'll continue exploring how faith takes shape in ordinary lives and ordinary places. You can find all our information in the show notes, and until next time, have a great day.